Hello! So, my solution for not walking on air totally works with no issues or delays? No. Can't lie to you. You're all such a wise and discerning audience. So, in case you weren't paying attention, let's look at my problem again. Little man walks on air, specifically in places where a bridge could be built, but hasn't been built yet. So, to fix this, I need three things. 1. I need the ground to be walkable when the bridge is complete. 2. I need the ground to be ignored when the bridge is down. 3. I need the bridge to be considered as an option even while it is down, but never walked on until it's fixed. Otherwise, NPCs will never build bridges. Got all that? Right, so what's the solution? We need to be able to turn nodes on and off. And I don't know how to do that with a generic nav mesh package that most people use. So say hello to A-star pathfinding. That's actually the name of the algorithm used to find paths, but there's a package called that. It does all the big fun math for me as long as I tell where the ground is. Now, this package has 3 ways of telling where the ground is. Grid graph, point graph, and nav mesh graph. Now, in the past, I've mostly used this point graph one, because I know how to place them down using raycasting, and because I can use them to make walkable bridges over walkable areas. Now, this overhang ability for the grid mode is behind a paywall, as well as the feature that calculates nav meshes for me, and I refuse to pay for anything at any time. In my experience, unless the points or nodes are pretty close together, the movement can be a little choppy. I don't really want it to look like my NPCs are following a grid. So I thought my solution lay in the nav mesh. Technically, I was using a nav mesh earlier with the old system, so it will probably look just as smooth and work just as well. Now, look here at that slot right there. That is where you put the nav mesh. It doesn't make the nav mesh for you, you have to give it the nav mesh. Now, there was some finagling here with a file. See here, this is an FBX file, but it's also like a JSON file on the inside. Here, look at this. Anyway, I figured out how to directly edit it, and that's all I needed. See, a nav mesh is just a mesh, a bunch of points called vertices grouped into a bunch of triangles, and those triangles are used by my A-star pathfinding package to do the magic and tell the NPC where the ground is. So all we need is all the triangles in the right place, right? Yes, but where do they go? More importantly, how do we get the computer to tell itself where they go? Now, you may remember from my Space Battle video that I used raycasting to find where all the nodes go. This is the first step in my nav mesh generation algorithm trademark. I raycast a bunch of points on the ground, and they give me a rough outline of the ground, including the bridges. Next, I actually use something called erosion. See, I was having trouble in my testing where the NPC was falling off the bridge while turning the corner, which is just so dumb. Anyway, I fixed this by removing one layer of nodes along the outside, which is actually pretty simple. You just have to calculate which nodes have fewer than 8 neighbors, and if they do, that one is always on the outside. Find all those and remove them, and boom, same shape, just smaller and farther away from the edge. Now, how to turn these into a mesh. Now, I need to be honest with you. This is about as far as I got on my own great genius. The rest of these steps I had to discover, work out, and test through research and stealing. For example, this video here, which didn't go in depth, but laid out the steps I would use and gave me the word ear clipping, which was crucial in my master plan. Now, I saw their first step was covering the ground with little meshes, and thought, hey, those are quads. And they were, and so I did. I replaced every point with a quad made of 2 triangles, like so. And I removed all the duplicate points. If for some reason the points were in about the same place but not actually touching, like here, I replaced both points with points in the average of their positions, which had the nice effect of giving me this lovely slope. Now, this could technically be a nav mesh, but if you watched the video I stole, or knew this from how A-star pathfinding works, you would know that we now have twice as many nodes as we would have if we had just left the transform nodes. And we want to give the computer as few nodes as possible, because we are being nice to it. So we need to remove all the points on the inside of the shape, leaving only the edge, and replace them all with the fewest amount of triangles that will still be the same shape. Now, it is in fact really easy to remove all the internal points, because, in case you forgot, I have a foolproof way of determining if a point is on the edge. Last time I calculated that to remove the edge, but now I will use it to keep only the edge. Now up to this point, I've been using gizmos.drawMesh to display my progress. That was not going to work anymore. You see, it can only draw valid meshes. And valid meshes not only need their points, but also all their triangles. No triangles, no mesh drawing. But I need to see all the nonsense I'm about to do. So I created this, the pseudo mesh, or PS mesh for short, or psh mesh. It has a list of vertices and a list of connections instead of triangles. Now on the outside, it probably looks identical to a list of triangles, it's just numbers, but these numbers are always read in groups of 2 instead of 3, and they just represent a single connection between 2 points. And now you can see, when I run gizmo.drawLine, boom. Now, before I continue, I want to talk about a very dangerous weapon. Execute always. If you put this tag at the beginning of your class, it will make your script always execute, even when not in play mode. This is very useful when I'm, say, creating my own game development tool, creating and destroying objects for building the game. However, this comes with some possible pitfalls. In play mode, none of your actions get saved. Outside of play mode, your actions can be permanent. You can also create an infinite loop that runs while you're outside play, and there's no way to stop it. You have to close the program, and if that doesn't work, turn off your computer. I had to do that a couple times. But if you avoid these dangers, it can be really helpful, like here, where I want to build the floor and display my progress, but not while I'm playing the game. Now, to make sure my mesh has as few triangles as possible, I need as few vertices as possible, while still having the same shape. Now you might ask, which vertices can we get rid of? And I might answer, all the ones on the flat edges. Confused, you ask, how do we determine if they're on the flat edge? And calmly I explain that we just need to check the normalized vector 3 directions to the points on the opposite sides of the point and confirm that they are exactly opposite to each other. Panicking and scared, you cry out, what's a vector 3? It's 3 numbers. Anyway, replace 2 connections with 1 connection and boom, only corner vertices. Now of course, our mesh, while perfectly outlined-ish, is tragically bereft of triangles. Once again, we must calculate what must be done to tell the computer to tell itself where the triangles go. Which I remind you, because at this point I didn't really remind myself, is important because it would look smoother and run faster if I use a nav mesh instead of a grid system. Which we need to do ourselves, because I get more control over whether or not the nodes are walkable or not with the second program. Anyway, ear clipping. What is ear clipping? Well, select a point, calculate the angle of the 2 edges connected to it, and if there are any points inside that angle, ignore this point and move on. If it is locally convex and is all clear, then make a new connection, lock off that point from future consideration. In short, make an ear, then clip it off. Do this enough times and you'll eventually make all the triangles possible with any shape. Alright, let's implement it. So, after a couple more days of work, I got it to this point here. And I'm not going to cover all the little things I had to do to get this to work, but here's a small list. Remove duplicate points. Again, remove duplicate connections. Algorithm to turn a list of connections into a list of triangles. Algorithm to turn a list of triangles into a list of connections. Displaying the order the points were set in the list by using lines in a gradient color. Displaying order via height. Translate this Python code I stole into C#. Mimic a linked list without having a linked list. And of course, run the code over and over and over again with every little change to see what I did. Great! One small problem. Holes. Yes, holes. Holes are the problem because they will ruin everything. Okay? But not all hole is lost. Yes, I found this entirely different PDF nerd document talking about ways to deal with holes. Bird's eye view is you draw an imaginary line to the right from the point in the hole that is furthest to the right until you touch an edge of the outer wall. Create a temporary point there and draw another line to one of the points on either side of that edge, making a triangle. Now double check that there are no points from the mesh inside this triangle. If there are, choose the closest one of those inside points. Now we have our mutually visible point. Why are mutually visible points so important? Because that's how we keep our polygon a simple polygon. A polygon with no holes and no cross lines. And needs to be simple because the ear clipping method only works on simple polygons. Everyone lost? Yes? Good. Now, if you're paying attention, you may be wondering, wait a minute, how can you tell which points are in the outer circle and which points are in the inner circle? Because if you remember, to a computer, a mesh looks like this. How does it know? Well, it's actually pretty simple once I spend a couple days figuring it out. It's the connections. Take a point I know is guaranteed to be on the outside. Add it to a list. Choose a point connected to it and add that to the list. Check the connection on the other side for the next point, and so on. Eventually, we'll loop back around to the first point. And that list of points is the first outside loop. In that order, too. And the other points from our pool are part of the inner loops. Now, grab the first one. Create a new list and check all the connections again. Do this ad nauseum until you have all the points and loops accounted for. Use the mutually visible point finding method and boom! Technically, a simple shape, and technically a valid mesh, and therefore technically a nav mesh, and therefore technically useful for pathfinding. Woo! Let's test. Hang on. What's it doing? Oh goodness, that's awful looking. Oh gosh, look at it. It has to go through the middle of the triangle. Oh jeez. That's not like the original nav mesh method at all. Okay, so technically it is, but here's some interesting things. So I'm guessing that nav mesh agents are still using a sort of A-star pathfinding method, and that it even used the individual triangles as nodes, so the path is technically made of triangle nodes, giving us paths that look like this. However, it also does something else, a sort of path processing or path smoothing. Basically, shortening the path as much as possible while still inside the nav mesh. Now, NPCs and units moving like this is obviously unacceptable. So, I scrambled to see if there was a way to fix it that wasn't just me doing it myself. And there was. You had this component called a funnel that just fixes it. Yay! But that got me thinking. And thinking in a bad, ominous way. This funnel, this path smoothing, this was there the whole time. Does this fix the grid-shaped problem on its own? Was I going through all the trouble of baking my own nav meshes for nothing, for no reason, and for no benefit? No? Oh, thank the Lord. Now, look at that. Now, ignore the parts where I haven't finished the inner loop algorithm. After that, I sat down and said, I should probably make a video logging my development progress. There's a lot more to do, including the whole point of doing it this way. That is, making nodes as unwalkable sometimes, but not all the time. But of course, there's lots of tweaks that need to be worked out. For example, will it work with overhangs? Holes that block each other? What about very big playing fields? Then there's very secondary things like, can I maybe use this for the moving spaceships? Honestly, I don't know, but hopefully for the next video, I have fixed many of the needed bugs and tested if it's a good solution for my problem. In any case, thanks for watching, and peace be with you.